I'm Godfrey. I'm the chair of the CAC. So let's start off by reading the mission statement of the CAC. The purpose statement of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters during November 2nd, 2004 and November 6, 2012 elections are accomplished with Pprta funds. This committee reports directly to the Board of Directors. All right, so we have a call to order. Right now, Ed, you and Carlos can vote if two more people show up.
One of those two is Karen, and she did show up, so
Okay.
Ed cannot vote.
Ed can or can't?
Cannot.
Can. Okay, so you're first on the list. So you're out of there. No, you can't. Just like that. No, so for the new members, the way this thing works, we have some alternates. The alternates can participate in conversation, but can only vote if regular appointed members are not here. And then because we have four, we have a priority. It's just a rotating priority. And so in this case, Ed's at the top of the barrel. And so if Brian shows up, then Carlos won't be able to vote either. We'll have a full house. So that's kind of the way that works and what that's all about. I'd like to take an opportunity to welcome our new member, Karen Aspelin, right? And Karen, could you tell us a little bit? Push the little speaker that's got a mouth on it. There you go.
I'm Karen Aspelin. Lived in Colorado Springs for 6 years. I am really excited to be on the committee, and thanks for inviting me.
And who do you represent?
CTAB.
CTAB, okay. All right, welcome. All right. Do I have a recommendation to approve approve the agenda? Do I hear a second? Second, Tony. All right, thank you. Any public comment for items not in the... Oh, I'm sorry. We need to vote on the agenda. I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Public comment period for items not on the agenda. Is there... Yes, ma'am.
Is this working?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Ann Esch. I'm from Green Mountain Falls, and I have some things I'd like to say.
Okay.
We had an emergency meeting last night of the trustees. There were only 2 trustees that could come, so it turned into more of a workshop. But we had a lot of people coming because of the damage in Green Mountain Falls, recent flooding. It was just devastating. First, I would like to also thank the county of El Paso, because they sent 6 people up just a day or so ago to assess our damage. So we don't have to pay for it. Thank heaven for that. The mayor has declared a state of emergency and started the ball rolling. Last night there were a lot of people. Usually people don't like to come to the meetings particularly, but they do. And there was a lot of devastation in Green Mountain Falls, personal property, concerns of their homes, in addition to the town damage. And we have great problems with our own watershed that's also part of Fountain Creek watershed. We have a lot of streams coming down. And this particular storm sort of sat over Green Mountain Falls.
Yep.
It was worse there than it was in Woodland Park.
Right.
I would like to raise the question, I guess the directors, I haven't been doing this very long either, but the Board of Directors could consider including Teller County or Woodland Park, some of the upstream communities. For instance, if you know where Cristola Inn is, there's a big creek that comes down there that's in Teller County. So the whole watershed, we're working on that, trying to cooperate with Teller and Woodland Park. I also go to the other regional meeting.
PPACG?
Yes. And I'll read you also what our town manager said. I don't know if it's appropriate. I've got it written out so you all can have it. He said, with respect to Belvedere Road, we have money, to repair that road. Well, it washed out even worse. Apparently, water and mud came into the second story of some homes on that road. Jason has talked with the county engineer's office. The latest weather event really underscored the need to address drainage issues on our roadways in a meaningful fashion rather than simply resurfacing roads. The ability to do that might depend on the actual ballot language, but I think it's worth emphasizing. So I've emphasized it. And this, I understand, would go to the Board of Directors, my comments.
Sorry. It can, but Tyler Stevens is on the board and is here.
When did they come?
Their meeting is next Wednesday about this time.
So I might come and say it again.
You can do that. You're more than welcome to do that, Dan. And I would certainly prep this field with talking to Tyler as well.
I did try to do that and wasn't able to reach him, but I know he's been around quite a while.
Right. Yeah, he has.
Is he still part of the board?
Yes, he's trustee.
He's a director on that. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And you might also just suggest talking to Rick in terms of getting clarity on the ballot language. I'm not aware of a provision to do that in this program, other than a redistribution of some maintenance money, but it's based on population, and the funds are distributed on a percentage of the census population. So,
Oh, is that right?
yeah, right. And so I'm not sure that mechanism, but I'll defer the specifics on that to Rick, and then I would encourage you to come maybe speak to the board next week.
I will. And I'd also like to mention, I can't think of her last name, Jennifer?
Jennifer?
Where's Jennifer?
Jennifer's right there.
Oh, she was in Green Mountain Falls not long ago, talking to us about our roads and the complications that have affected the whole state.
Sure.
But she's been very helpful, and we appreciated her coming to talk to us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other public comments from members? Anyone from the audience that would like to comment at this time? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to, do you have a, oh, sorry.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to, is this the time for public comment on things that are not on the agenda? Or-
Yes, not on,
I'm sorry, then yes, I do have.
okay. Just please state your name and what your, you push them, well, it looks like, oh, there you go.
All right. My name is Andrew Dalby. I am a business owner and landowner adjacent to the Dublin Drive, or the Dublin Boulevard widening project.
Okay.
And I'm having some conflict with the project manager there. The original project plan is deficient in a number of ways, in that it doesn't meet the traffic engineering criteria. I had my engineer in discussions with the project manager. We've had meetings. We did have a meeting a couple of weeks ago where we came up with an agreement. Last week I was notified that the city was just unilaterally deciding not to fulfill that agreement, and that if I don't agree to their alternative proposal, which is still deficient and just cuts off my access without providing me adequate business access, that they are going to go with their original plan, which is seriously deficient and harms public safety.
Mike?
Are you Mike Chavez?
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We are working with Mr. Dalby, and there's some things, one of the,
That's not true. The latest letter I had
I
says
signed-
there will be no more communication. So I've had to escalate to this venue.
well, we are working. We did respond to him, and one of the issues was that one of the legal documents that we had was his attorney totally, or not totally, but changed it quite a bit to terms that we just can't agree to. So we're working on things.
The terms that my attorney modified those to were terms that were agreed to by the city 12 years previous, the prior time that the road was worked on. And once again, the letter from Mr. Chavez says there will be no further negotiations. You accept it or you leave it. There's nothing more.
Okay. I appreciate your comment. I'm not sure there's anything this group can do about it other than monitor it or pass it up to the board and see, but because it's a contractual issue with the city, this committee doesn't have any ability to direct them in any way to change that.
Then I'm not sure who I need to proceed with.
I'm not necessarily sure either, so I'll have to see if we can find out who that might be.
Okay, and again, I'd like to resolve this amicably, because like I said, we had an agreement that I thought everybody was on board with. I'd really rather not resort to a lawsuit, so,
Okay,
thank you.
I appreciate your comment. Yeah, you may consider, we'll get your contact information if you would. And
How would you like me to?
just provide that at some point, and I'll get, but before you leave, and just scratch out that stuff that's there, and we'll try to get back to you with something.
Okay, and what was your name again?
Jim Godfrey.
Jim Godfrey, thank you.
Okay, any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 5th meeting?
So moved. I have a correction to the minutes.
Okay, Tom has a correction.
5A states that we looked at the May sales figures. We actually looked at April. Oh, yeah.
Oh, right here, sorry. And that should be May, right?
It should be April.
It should be April? Oh, sorry.
And,
So do I have any other corrections or additions?
yeah, Mr. Godfrey, I did have some corrections, and also just clarification, since we do have, it looks like a full house, I will not be, no longer in the voting status, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So then I'm going to just ask one of my colleagues here on the committee who does have voting to go ahead and make this a motion if necessary. But it's just transcription errors on public comment, number 3. There was a reference to Key 1 report. That should be first quarter, Q1, first quarter. So change Key 1 to first quarter. And then about 3 lines down, there's a reference in capitalization to Trail Committee. There's no such thing. That should have been the Trails Community, just a general public Trails Community. Again, those are just transcription errors.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as corrected? Tom? Gene? Tom? Tom, move. Gene, you second? Okay. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Financial reports, Ms. Bev. Yeah, so this shows.
Good afternoon.
This shows.
We received the May sales and use tax, and we haven't received June yet. We'll receive that hopefully before the next board meeting, but it might be slightly after that because of the way the state reports due to the Was there a holiday? No, it's early, the board meeting's very early this year, this month, I mean, sorry. So anyway, May, set 8.7 million, 8,722,000, I'm sorry, compared to a budget of 8,742,000. So we're just a little below budget by almost 20,000, and we're ahead year-to-date by 1,055,000. So just, we're not killing it this year, so, compared to budget anyway. But then the budget went up quite a bit compared to 2 years ago, and stayed flat pretty much compared to last year, because we had raised it to 1 million last year. So, and then compared, on page 2, compared to the prior year, we're ahead in May by 56,000, or by year-to-date 1.4 million. So hopefully June will be a good month because of the Warrior Games and the Senior Open. But let's keep our fingers crossed
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Any questions?
We need to be above the line to.
Yeah, we do. We need to be above the line.
Any questions for Bev on the financials? Okay. Thank you, Bev.
Okay, thanks.
Item number 6, capital maintenance public transportation contracts, City of Colorado Springs.
Good afternoon, Mike Chavez, City Engineering. Got five items for your review. First one is to change order to Martin Marietta Materials to add some additional paving on the Cascade bike route and improvements. A contract was approved for $78,000 earlier, a couple months ago, and we have more paving to do, so we got pretty good prices, so we're adding another section to that. So that's what the $26,000 change order is for.
This is all north of railroad tracks, right?
It is between Fillmore, it's on Cascade between Fillmore and Winters.
Mike, is this the area that's in dispute with the North End neighbors?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm well away from that.
Mr. Guybray, Mr. Chavez here had a question on this as well, on this asphalt widening. In the June meeting package, the funds available was listed as $110K. In here, it's actually gone up to $130K. So was that an internal budget change to this line item?
I think we had originally 130. I think we had 110 of one source, but we actually had some other funds.
So did this increase for this month?
Well, I can't remember, but this is what we've had along. This is what we're planning. It's 130.
I'll tell you what, we can follow up line.
Okay.
In the June package, it was 110. Here it's
Yeah.
130. I just was curious.
Okay.
No issues. Thank you.
Next item is improvements at Briargate and Voyager. Basically, we're adding a third through lane westbound across Voyager on Briargate. There's enough asphalt width to accommodate that, but there's some medium modifications and some, what else is there? And some yeah, and so we have to modify the intersection basically to allow the third lane through. And that is going to be done ahead of 2C paving.
Is that eastbound or westbound, Mike?
It's westbound.
Okay.
And the next item is pre-overlay pipe. So there's
How do you pre-overlay something that's existing? I'm just curious.
yeah. Well, that's what we call it. So that is a pipelining, 400 feet of pipelining on Southgate between Lake and Montrose.
Is this the injection lining that they put in?
I'm not sure, Cole, will answer that one.
Yeah, so they're doing this prior to overlaying the street, is what the
Right.
pre-overlay part is.
Oh, okay.
It's actually a resin, fiberglass resin that they put a bladder in, they fill it with hot water or steam, it conforms to the inside, basically makes the pipe new. It's a structural lining, so that's what we use.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Cole.
Next item is a a consultant contract for the preliminary design of the replacement of the Nevada and Tejon bridges, the railroad bridges that are just south of downtown. That's kind of was scheduled later on in the RTA program, but the railroad came to the city and was looking at replacing or doing something with the Tejon Bridge. So we wanted to accelerate that project to coordinate with them and take care of both bridges, at least in design, so that we have an idea of what we need to do and what kind of funding we're going to need to seek.
Okay. Rep?
Mike, I have a question. In the backup material, it says that CDOT turned, and it was not CDOT apparently, but it is when it was actually happened. The Nevada Bridge was built in 1948 and owned by CDOT, whatever they were called then. And the Tejon Bridge was built in the early 1900s by the railroad. And no one's sure of the ownership. But you said the railroad has come to you. Are they going to help participate? Because the way I interpret that, you still own it, the railroad.
We don't have a clear agreement. Most of these bridges, there's an agreement with the railroad, and those agreements usually say, city, it's your responsibility. We were here first, and you wanted to build a road under or above our railroad, so if you want to go ahead and do it, fine, but it's yours. We're still working on the title of that, but basically, the railroad's pretty powerful, and if we altered, if we built a bridge or an underpass, it's usually the city's responsibility to take care of it. Now, they are working with us, and they do want to bring some money to the table. Like, they're concerned about the bridge and its safety, so they were going to just replace it as is, but we don't like that because it's not high enough, it's too narrow. So instead of letting them come and just put back what's there in a new form, we're working with them to see how we can work and coordinate with them to build both bridges that'll have better clearance for truck traffic and stuff like that. The exact dollar amount, we don't know yet, but we are working and they are willing to contribute some.
Do you have some feel for what the two bridges might cost? When I say that, when we put together Pprta 2, we did that with the idea that we would be able to receive approximately 75% of, we only scheduled 75% of what.
Now, this is, the RTA project is only for the design of the bridge. There's no construction money. So we'll have to find some, and it might be an RTA 3 project, the construction of the bridges.
If it lasts that long.
Yeah.
Aaron, you want to add anything?
What was the question is how much is the replacement's going to cost?
Yeah, estimated. You say it was not part of 2?
It is, the design only is part of Pprta 2.
All right. I'm premature in asking the question.
To finish it, it's about $30 million is what we're estimating. We are planning on participating with the railroad. There is cost sharing that has to go through the PUC, which is the Public Utility Commission, and then they kind of are the referee and negotiate those final contractual dollar amounts between the local road authority and the railroad itself.
It would seem kind of equitable if they were planning on replacing with a similar structure, that if we modify that for our purposes to benefit the city, the additional would be the cost borne by the local community. So they would hopefully be kicking in what they would have been paying to replace it, and then any additional modification we make to suit our purposes would be our cost.
Yeah, and the railroad's really good at this. They do this all over the country, especially over creeks and stuff. But they can actually come in, demo a bridge, replace it in a day, and have it back open to traffic. Just because they just come in, bring in new girders, everything's prefab, they set it down, put new ballasts and a deck on it. But in our situation, it's not that easy because we want improvements at this location. So
Right.
they will only want to participate with as fast as they could do it. So there's going to be a delta between
it's gonna
what they think a replacement is and what we think a replacement is.
Go ahead, Tom.
A while back, it was proposed to us that they wanted to double the capacity of the steel cars coming out of Pueblo and come up here and we were going to have to reconstruct all the bridges on the right-of-way because it was our desire to have the tunnel underneath the bridge, not the railroads. This is one of those bridges, isn't it?
I don't recall. I vaguely remember that, a little bit of that conversation, but I think getting into too many details at this point, being it's a design only that they're trying to get done.
But that design would have to hold.
Yeah, we'll work with the railroad and make sure that the bridge is designed to their current or their future needs.
So that project's kind of gone away. I mean, they were putting concrete ties and coming up north. We went down and looked at them.
I'm not familiar. We haven't heard anything on that.
So my sense is that if we put, ultimately, I think your list says $3 million into design work here, that we own the problem at that point. If I were the railroad at that point, I'd say, fine, go ahead and replace it. Because you designed it to your specifications, not ours.
Well, like Aaron said, they have a certain thing, a minimum amount that they will do, and we don't want them just to come in a day and set
But you
something.
don't even know who owns it right now, Mike.
Well, it's our responsibility. I mean, for the most part, those agreements favor the railroad,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately.
So, Mike, the design also is complete, the final design, and then support for construction has another 100,000. So, I'm not sure that I'd come up with a $3 million. My math.
We just need to have the full scope of work so that if things fall in place and there's money, we can just continue with the consultant rather than have to go and RFP it again. So we just like to make sure that the full scope of work is included because purchasing sometimes has some issues if we didn't have it in the initial RFP. So it's just kind of a preparatory
Placeholder.
thing.
Yeah.
If you go, as Tom just brought up, if you go forward with a design and come up with one that's acceptable, okay, to the city, I'd want an agreement of some sort from the railroad that they're going to help.
Well, there will be agreements. I mean, and part of the reason this price is pretty steep, there's quite a bit of work and negotiation with the railroads, review on their part. We have to come up with a new agreement for the new bridge, and that's where the terms and conditions will be hashed out, including financial cost sharing.
Carlos?
Yeah, Carlos Perez, the alternate. This topic, of course, with the Shooks Run is going to come up in the next presentation here. In the Envision Shooks Run's facilities master plan, there is a note here that this particular railroad crossing design and the construction would actually extend west to Shooks Run. So the project will likely extend to the east of Shooks Run due to the expected changes to the railroad. Is that still true, or has anything changed with that from the facility master's plan? And maybe Aaron can answer
Yeah,
this.
so I'll let Aaron answer that when he gives his update on that.
But that's in the plan, so you don't know. We'll just let
Yeah.
Aaron answer it not as part of this, but as part of the Shooks Run
Yes.
presentation.
Well, they kind of are meshing together.
I guess the question is the design. It's a design contract. What are the boundaries of this design contract? Is it just from the abutment to the abutment across Nevada and Tejon, or does it extend further east and west of the along the right-of-way of the railroad
So it
tracks?
stands further because some of the options are actually a new alignment of the railroad, so there'll be a certain amount of tie-in that will extend beyond the bridge. So we're not just coming right at the bridge. We may have to go quite a bit further on either.
Quite a bit, to Shooks Run being quite a bit?
So what we did is we scoped a railroad survey to try to determine the right-of-way, and it essentially goes from, we took it all the way up to Cimarron, which would be past the Martin Drake power plant, and we had to do track surveys for grades. If we do try to get better clearance and start raising grades, we need to know how far that has to go back. So we took it to Cimarron, and then we took it to Shooks Run for the right-of-way and the survey of the tracks. We are also going up the BNSF spur that is part of the Shooks Run to identify what right-of-way is there also.
Okay, and this is in the design. Does it include also this? I've heard this term, and maybe I don't want to steal your thunder in a
Oh, that's
presentation.
okay.
This
It's not that
concept or this
exciting.
design called the shoe fly, which would be an alternative track that would allow the facilitate, a temporary track is my understanding, that allows construction of new track or new track bed and ballast and so forth, everything.
Shoe fly is one of the options for replacing these railroad bridges as well as the pedestrian underpass
The pedestrian underpass,
for Shook's Run.
okay, thank you.
Okay. The last one is intersection improvements at Mellow and Mount View for the neighborhood. We're going to put a median, it's a little bit of landscaping to kind of get a little bit of traffic calming and kind of getting a little bit of an entrance, neighborhood entrance, so that motorists and people driving, kind of understand that they're coming into a neighborhood, not a thoroughfare.
Quick question on that. Is there a particular reason we're paying for the landscaping on that?
Yes, when we do some of these smaller projects, we will install the landscaping as long as somebody, a HOA or somebody, will maintain it, because it really doesn't cost a whole lot it's going to be, low water use plants, no irrigation. So, we'll put in some shrubs and some plants, and then they'll maintain them.
Am I to assume this is going to be similar to what was installed along Platt Avenue to the west of Union there? Those little don't come into our neighborhood blocks that they've got?
Well, it'll be immediate. I'm not sure. It's not to restrict traffic, but I think it's just to give a sense that you're coming off Nevada and you're coming into a neighborhood, just to try to slow people down. They see a median there that and just try to do a little bit of. Okay. It's not a traffic calming project per se, but it does have that effect.
Okay, because that's what it says. It says traffic calming.
Well, it does have, but that's not the goal of it. But that's just one of the byproducts.
Okay, from what you said, the landscaping that's being paid for by this is not going to add significant.
No, it's not.
Do we have any kind of figure on that?
I don't have the bid breakdown, but like I said, it's mostly shrubs and plants, no irrigation, and the neighborhood.
So this is kind of a gift to the HOA.
Well, no, I think a lot of these projects, we don't want to just throw in concrete and asphalt and everything we do. I think we'd like to put a little bit of, as long as it's sustainable and not a huge cost.
Okay.
I got a question, Mike, kind of along the same line. I'm a little concerned. We've had projects presented before that present engraved stone that are telling people you're now driving into this neighborhood and this elaborate project. We've had some of those come up in the past. And so we going down a slippery slope that every neighborhood's going to want to have a little entrance sign out there, welcome to Craigmore, or welcome to this, or welcome to that the city's paid for in PPRTA money. And so that's where I'm concerned. I'm very familiar with this intersection. It's a four-way stop there, and I'm just not sure what a median in the middle of Mallow Road is going to do at that intersection, other than we're throwing Craigmore a bone after we built the apartment. You guys let the apartment complex be built there or something. So I guess I'm just concerned about we're now paying for landscaping and signs entering into neighborhoods, and what precedents that's going to set for the rest of the communities.
Okay. We're kind of doing this work for traffic engineering, so I'll have them come and talk to you. But we're not going to be doing this. It's not every neighborhood is going to get entrance. I think there are certain neighborhoods that have they're kind of situated where they have a lot of heavy traffic, and Mount View is one of those where there's a lot of traffic on it. If it was a true residential street and people wanted an entryway, we're not going to give them that. But there are certain traffic situations where this treatment is helpful. But I'll get with traffic and Kathleen and maybe have her come and speak to the idea of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think, because you're right, there is a fair amount of traffic on Mount View, but it only goes into that neighborhood, or it's a shortcut to UCCS. The only other way out of there is out around the roundabout down by the park, and you end up out in that direction, unless you go out to Union through that road if that gate's open. So, I mean, I'm just, I would like to know a little bit more about what we're doing here from a personal thing, and whether we're heading down the road of setting a precedence or not in this case. And so
Okay.
there is a fair amount of traffic on Mount View, I get it. But like I said, there's only three or four entrances into that entire neighborhood there. And so I'm just kind of curious where we're headed with this.
Just a suggestion, too, I would probably use the term traffic management than traffic calming. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, no.
Carlos?
Yeah, I was just, again, just to follow up on your comments, I just wanted to understand in the package here, you say that this median or whatever is part of traffic calming, right, in this neighborhood, and the landscaping and the median is part of this treatment for this intersection as far as a traffic calming solution or traffic management, however we wish to describe it. Is that correct? I read it correctly?
Yes, And like I said, I'll have.
And landscaping
Kathleen
is
come in.
typically, in engineering, used as part of traffic calming techniques. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we beat that. Larry?
Jim, would it be appropriate to postpone item number 5 until next month's meeting to get a little bit more clarification, including several questions that have been brought up relative to this project?
I'll leave that to you guys in the committee if you want to modify the city's stuff. I don't feel comfortable making that proposal. I've made my comment, but I would certainly entertain that unless there's an impact.
I'd rather not postpone it, but we'll definitely get somebody here to talk about.
We're talking 30,000 there. It's not like it's a ton of money, but I'm more worried about the precedents than I am the money.
In the past, we've gotten information via email. Would that be sufficient? Because that would allow it to not be postponed, but might answer some of the questions and concerns that the members of the committee have.
Good point, Brian. Let me make this suggestion. Let's ask the city to provide some feedback and some additional information on this project. We ask Rick if he can disseminate that, and we do that before the board meeting. And if necessary, I can bring up our objection or our concerns at the board meeting and see where they go with it. Does that sound right, Tom?
And I have a question on the railroad bridge thing, that I think Rev brought up the issue of the $100,000 for construction support, but the title says Nevada Avenue, Tejon, street crossing reconstruction design only. If the construction is not till PPRTA 3, if there ever is one, what are we supporting?
I think,
Because it's
Again,
years in the
we
future.
needed the full scope in the contract. We're only asking for Phase 1 approval at this point. Phase 2 would come in and final design, and then if we actually have money to go to construction, we'd come back and would request authorization for the third phase.
Construction money would come in the next PPRTA iteration if there is one.
If there's one, or federal, grant, it's hard to say. But we just want the contract approved in concept to have all the scope so that we don't have to go back out.
and what he's asking.
And the other thing is, actually speaking of federal money, is if we'd like to procure the whole scope of work, because if there's federal money, we have to follow the federal guidelines for RFP, and so this covers us in that respect.
Yeah, and so you're currently only asking for the $1,049,000 in phase 1. So this is
Only
just
$1 million on something we have no idea what the ultimate relationship will be like.
yes.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I have
Three
reservations just
no's.
because nobody owns, or nobody's accepting ownership responsibility for the Tejon Bridge.
We can't.
It just said it's the city's
It's the
responsibility.
city's responsibility, and we
He
can't.
said it
change
over and over.
Yeah.
So,
And this is an A-list project, it needs to be accomplished, there's $3 million budgeted for design, and I think it's a good
What's
time
the
to
question?
bring it in line with the fact that the railroad is looking at coming in and doing something and bringing some money. So we want to coordinate and just come out with a good project that benefits the railroad and the city.
I have the same concerns, but my understanding is that because of the nature of the project, we're not really going to be able to flesh most of this out until we actually have something in preliminary design.
Yes, because the options are there's quite a bit of variance in the different options to get this built.
Right. So I'm actually, surprisingly, I'm actually comfortable with that.
Tom?
I really think you need to get some firm decision on the railroad coming in with this double capacity trains, which at the time when Brian, I don't know if you remember that, they were talking about rebuilding the whole right of way through the city, or maybe going around it, but they are laying concrete ties down south and coming north with a railroad bed that hold, was it a 200,000-pound car? I forgot what. And that's going to screw up all.
No, we will work with the railroad and make sure that we design whatever they need.
I mean, this is a railroad bridge. I would assume that you're going to work with the railroad to come up with a design for this thing.
But they proved back then for the contracts that we are going to pay for the bridges because it was our interest in getting across the railroad tracks, not theirs. So bridges were our responsibility.
And we're going back a long ways, but the discussion back then, a lot of it's centered around they wanted to increase the carrying capacity, and the city, because we actually have roadways that go underneath these two particular bridges that we're discussing, because that was a city thing, the city actually ended up taking ownership. The concern that I think that we all had back then was that, okay, as long as the railroad is willing to take a certain amount of responsibility for what they were going to improve upon, the extra increased capacities that we were looking for our design to allow for easier truck traffic and things of that nature were really going to end up being our responsibility. That was the nature of the discussion back then. I'm assuming that kind of stays the same
Yes.
now.
The Fontanero crossing was a big issue at the time
Yeah.
because of the city around on the other side. That was one that.
But I actually kind of accept Mike's assertion that because of the nature of these projects, these two bridges, in addition to the some of the city planning that's gone on, like with Shook's Run, an example, we actually have to get some of this fleshed out and then negotiate with the railroad to figure out what's going to be happening. So planning, as far as designing, I actually kind of see that as being
Well, it's very essential.
the first step in the negotiation process on this.
Right.
Whereas normally, we would not be doing that. We would come at it from a different direction because of the nature of this particular project.
Right.
Normally,
It seems like the design process here that he's asking for funding for, that the city's asking for funding for, will answer many of the questions you guys have. If they're going to need more, stronger for heavier cars, if they're going to need more room on either side, out to Shook's Run, out to Cimarron, all of these questions will be answered once they do the study and once they do the preliminary planning. You can't answer those questions before you do those studies, and that's what they need to get done. So asking for those questions to be answered ahead of time, I think, is jumping the gun here.
But they are good points for them to take and really. So, Gene?
Couple of items. On item 5, you had asked about the ability to get additional information, and then I don't know how we vote on a recommendation after the meeting's over with when we're not holding a meeting. We can't, as far as I know.
Right.
My recommendation on item 5 is that we remove it pending additional information and let the city come back next month and address the issues with item 5.
All right, did you guys hear what Gene's recommendation was?
Yeah, is that a motion?
That's what I was getting ready to say.
I've got another comment.
Okay.
On item 4, with regard to the planning of the bridges, what kind of timelines are we looking at for the railroad wanting to begin work, design work, and other information that needs to be done planning-wise for replacement of those bridges? What's the time frame for replacement? Are we talking 5 or 10 years from now? Are we talking a year from now? Or do we know?
I think it's a little bit indeterminate. If the bridge were to have serious problems, they could come in and just do it. But we want to work with them so that we can avert that, because to some extent, the railroad, if they have a problem with the bridge and we don't respond fast enough, They could just come in and fill the thing and not worry about a bridge and just create a berm and put their tracks on it, and we have a street that's dead-ended. So all the, I mean, that's the kind of power that they do have. Now, they don't exert it, but they do. They do have that kind of authority, and so that's why we're working with them to try to cooperate to come up with a design that works for both the city and the railroad, and the timing, too.
And in all honesty, that would be the least expensive choice we can do. So, I mean, that's not something I think any of us want to see.
Well, which was there first, the railroad or the roads?
The railroad.
Railroad. Yeah. Brian had his hand up and then said, Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this point up, that the gross weight on rail for each one of these cars is 143 tons loaded. The length is 53.1 feet. Those cars are huge. There's no way that bridge, and I'm not an engineer, but I've been around this stuff long enough, there's no way that those cars are going to be supporting that weight. We're going to have a major nightmare on our hands. I think the railroad needs to come to the table and say that they're going to do something because they're increasing. That's what I'm trying to talk to. They are increasing their equipment. We're not saying we don't like the paint, we don't like this, we don't like that. They are increasing what they're shipping. Therefore, they're putting more weight and danger on people driving underneath that bridge.
But it's their track, and they have the authority. We really, you cannot strong-arm the railroad. Believe me, we've tried. And it's better to work with them.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Sit
and we
down
are.
and work with them about the cost of this first.
Well, like I said, as we have to have a plan.
You got to
go
know what you're costing out in order to have that. So, yeah, I get it. Cindy, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to respectfully disagree about taking number 5 out. We've talked a few times about second-guessing each of the member governments' contracts and how they handle their own business, and for $30,000, I don't really think we should. That's my opinion.
I agree with you.
I would agree, except that over the length of time that we've been discussing this, a long while back, we specifically discussed landscaping, and that this PPRTA was not responsible for this kind of landscaping for beautification of neighborhoods. And I think that's why some of the members might have some hesitation in that. I'm not exactly thrilled with the idea either, but I'm willing to accept Mike's assurances that it's a minimal cost, and that the HOA would be maintaining it, as long as there's some kind of an agreement on that with the HOA that they will maintain it. Because the biggest thing I would be worried about is just flushing money down the drain.
Okay, let's get this, wrap this up and get on with it. Somebody make a motion to what you want to do. Joan? Joan had her hand up. Jean, just a second.
Well, I'm toying between bifurcating, but I'm not, and I'm going to move that the city's contracts be approved as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
I second.
Oh, is it?
I just like to, one thing, is it, Mr. Railroad deal, we are crossing their right-of-way. They are not crossing ours.
Correct.
So that's something to keep in mind when we're talking about what they want to do with their right-of-way. And if they want to increase it to, what'd you say, 182,000 ton?
143 tons.
143 ton, that's in their right-of-way, and they need to, they will take care of their right-of-way. So we're guessing their territory. They're not guessing ours.
Right.
Okay, Rick, just 1 second, sir. Rick?
Rick Sonnenberg, Pprta Program and Contracts Manager. I just want to remind the CAC that the CAC and Board have approved funding of landscaping at Union Austin Bluffs, Fillmore, Proby Parkway, and an extra $750,000 for the I-25 Cimarron project.
Right.
And allow the city to use their maintenance money for watering all of the above.
Right.
Just a historical fact.
Okay. Okay, so we have someone in the audience that's, you've got something to say about these?
Yes, my name is Lee Milner, and I'm with the Trails community, and thank you for allowing me to address this. This item, I guess it's not number 4, regarding the railroad bridges, and a lot of excellent comments on sort of all sides of the issue. You're about to recommend spending, I guess, $1 million on a bridge, or starting to analyze a bridge that we don't even know whether the city has ownership of, which I don't really want to delay this, because this does tie in, as Mr. Perez, or perhaps ties in, and hopefully ties in, as Mr. Egbert has suggested, to one of the options of getting Shook's Run through. So I don't really intend to try to shut this down. On the other hand, I found out 2 years ago that South Royer, which was the connection to Shook's Run to make that go through, was going to be closed, and that nobody had seemed to pay much attention to that problem. I'm concerned that we're moving ahead with a plan that doesn't have the railroad at the table. I think there was leverage that could have been used, and I know, and I'm sure Mike is absolutely right, that there isn't much leverage, but that there was some leverage when the city the railroad wanted the South Royer cutoff to be shut, that wasn't used at that time, and I hate to see this contract go forward, though maybe it's necessary, without having really the railroad at the table, and then fully understanding that there is a trail connection that's critical. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't know if that's what you want.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to accept the city's 5 contracts as presented. Is any further discussion from the committee members?
Call for the question.
Could I recommend we do item 4 as a separate one?
No.
We either going to approve all of them or none.
That's the nomination, that's the motion on the table.
I'd like to modify the motion, but I'm not voting today, you know.
I am not going to change my motion.
Okay. So, all right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay, nays, raise your hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Was that 6?
7.
7 out of 17. 7 nays, and therefore 10 yays.
That's the way it is, yep. Okay. So motion passed. I will make sure we, all right, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. All right, El Paso County, 2018 Capital Maintenance Public Transportation Contracts. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Committee, Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County. We have 2 items today, one which went out with your packet and another that we are passing out right now. So I'll first address the one in your packet. We have an item on here, and this is with Stantec Consulting, and this is our pavement management data collection. We do this about every 5 years. The last time we came to you was about 2013. And what this does is it allows us to identify the condition of our roads, to be able to best determine where we are spending our funds for projects overlay and including our gravel roads. So it is something that we do every 4 to 5 years, and then utilize that data over the next 5 years. So this contract is amount, we had three bids. We looked at each of the bid, and the best value is the lowest bid, and that's Stantec for approximately $170,000.
Is that the guys with all the stuff on the trucks and they do it?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, it's the truck thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the same that did it.
And that is the same company who did it for us previously. We would have looked at a different company if they were best value and could provide the services. It just happened that this one came in low bid.
Okay.
Jennifer?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. On the county commissioner's agenda yesterday, there was a consent item for pavement management. Is this the same thing?
Correct. When we do our contracts, especially PPRTA contracts, they go before both the Board of County Commissioners and also the PPRTA, CAC, and Board. So it is the same contract.
Okay. So is the only reason it was pulled was it hadn't gone through our group yet?
The vendor had some changes to the conditions of the contract, and we're working those out. I feel that we will successfully work those out. And what we're asking for you today is essentially for the dollar amount and the vendor, and the lawyers will work on that contract. But because our procurement office, it'll probably be on next week. We pulled that just to make sure that we could resolve that, and I feel confident that we will get that accomplished before the board here and the Board of County Commissioners.
Jennifer, if I could real quick, I don't remember seeing this come up before the hack. Did it?
It doesn't. We talked about earlier the year at the hack in regards to that we were going to do the reevaluation this year, and I'm hopeful that we get the data back in time for us to utilize that to evaluate our roads for next year. We'll see how fast that they can do that. We are asking them to complete that. But then when we get the data back, then we have to go through that data and put it in and then use that evaluation. So I'm hopeful that we'll able to use that evaluation to prioritize our roads that will come back to the HAC and to the Board of County Commissioners next year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Number 2.
Number 2, and this one was passed out to you. I just want to apologize in advance for not having a lot of advance notice. And I'll speak through this, and you can kind of talk. But before I want to present the item, I spoke with Rick in regards to how we presented this item and also Beverly, and we discussed this because this is kind of an emergency item, and so I want to leave you with 2 options, and I think that those options are to be able to either approve this item today with a recommendation or recommend that we come back in a special session before the board. So I just wanted to start that with that in mind before I started, because we're asking for a recommendation, but another option is to do a special session once we have a vendor and a exact dollar amount with these contracts. So as you know, as you may know, we had a large substantial rain event on July 23rd, 2018. The county have done significant work in doing damage assessments, not only for El Paso County, but we've also worked with the Green Mountain Falls to assist them as well. And so one of the items that was very apparent and that we found out Tuesday morning because of an accident, and you might have seen it on the news, is that we had a washout at Old Pueblo Road. And if you saw that on the news, we had a young kid, it seems like maybe borrow his grandparents' car and drive it into the ditch, and then somebody else, and they called for help from the fire department, and the fire department ended up in this area where the road washed out. So we are very concerned about this location because it is a primary route for Hanover Fire Department. Without this road being repaired, there is a 15-mile detour in excess of that. So we are moving very quickly. We have some other damages in El Paso County, and we're continuing to assess that and determine whether we want to make a disaster declaration. So we are working on that. In the meantime, we have an immediate safety issue that we need to repair at this road. So we have looked at this location, the road failed, and caused us to close this roadway. What we are planning to do is put a replacement box culvert at this location. We have 7x7 box culverts in inventory, and what we want to do is be able to contract with a vendor to be able to use cranes, because we don't have cranes internally, to put those on our trucks, transport them down, and then have a second crane down at the site to be able to place those box culverts. Our Highway Division crew will be doing all the other work associated with placing those box culverts, and we are in some preliminary design to determine that alignment of the box culverts and the locations. Some of the utilities have already been relocated, and we are working with the utility companies to do other locations. We are currently also obtaining all the environmental permits to be able to do this work. So we are moving as quickly as possible. The other contract that we would like to be able to award at a later time, and we are working on an invitation for bid as we speak to be able to put out, is to finish the design for the wing walls and all the pertinent structure, and then to be able to the stabilization, head wall, and wing wall construction, so that from a long-term standpoint that road is protected and we won't have any further washouts. So essentially what I'm asking you today is either to approve us as we are working towards getting contracts in place at an estimated contract amount of $750,000. Again, these will be used to contract with the company to provide cranes, and then secondly for final design and construction for the remaining portion of which our Highway Division crews are unable to do, and to do the construction of the head walls and wing walls for the project. So we estimate that the total value of the project is $1.2 million. We're asking essentially today for $750,000, and as we get those contracts in place, we will come back to you and report those actual amounts.
Judge, Orr on the second page, that's a typo, right?
It is, ma'am, and I'm sorry.
I drove by it and I'm thinking, what are you doing over here?
So, yes.
That's all right.
Any questions for Jennifer?
I don't see much difference between this situation and Chestnut when that went out, and we moved on that right away.
Yep.
For safety reasons, et cetera. I moved to approve.
I second that.
Can I ask a question? Jen, is there any potential...
Microphone.
Is there any potential problem with the EPA and because you're dealing with water? Because it's an emergency, and when I say that, at least Chestnut you had a way around that didn't take you 15 miles out of the way. We don't have that with this.
Correct, and that's one of the reasons we feel like I've already, for example, contacted the Corps of Engineers. They've said, go ahead with the project, we'll work on the permitting at a later date. I mean, there are avenues to be able to do that. So, like I said, I think, I feel like we could have thrown a 36-inch culvert back in and repaved the road, but the other point I want to make is that we want to do the right thing and not have to be back here. So we are moving quickly, but we are also trying to do the right fix at this location so that we are not here again in a couple years.
Just for historical reference, Jennifer, the big project that we in El Paso County did on Old Pueblo Road with the Gabion boxes and working with the Corps of Engineers, is that north or south of this location?
South.
Okay. And the reason we had done that was for the same reasons, is because of this is a primary access for Hanover Fire, and I'm assuming that we'll be able to count on the Corps of Engineers being as cooperative, hopefully, on this particular project.
I called the region director on Friday and let him know our issue. He called me back right away Monday and said, get the job done.
Excellent.
We'll work with you later.
Okay.
So I'm confident. And I would also say, our engineers, we're busy with a lot, but this is our highest priority to go get this back open. Our staff is doing excellent work to try and get it done. And I think that we have a great way forward that is sustainable and low cost. I mean, we're still going to bid this work out and get a best value price. And we have good costs from our box culvert on Judge Orr that we just awarded last month. So, I mean, we will look at those costs and make sure that we are getting the best available costs. But ultimately, my highest priority as a county engineer is the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
Excellent.
Gene?
The total cost of $1.2 million includes any headwork that needs to be done on the bridge, is that correct?
Yeah, so I wanted to include, so that you know, I mean, we have the culverts in hand, there's a value to those culverts, and we also have our engineers working on this. We're going to be providing the preliminary design. The final design will be for the wing walls with the contractor. We're including that. But we're also doing, the survey. We're also doing internally the construction management and the materials testing. So I just want to explain to you that, we're asking for a certain amount of money here, but there's additional monies that, we are providing. And what I would also say is that if we end up declaring a disaster, we will also ensure, if this is eligible for reimbursement, that we will go back and get the full reimbursement as much as possible.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm inclined to, Joan, do you want to?
Are you open for a motion on the
We
two
already
county?
have a
Yes.
motion.
Pardon me?
Already have a motion.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
Who made that? Tom? Okay, sorry, I missed that, sorry.
Yeah, and I seconded it.
Okay. So we have a motion. I'm inclined to approve this for the sense of urgency here.
Yep.
And that they come back to us, and we don't want to hold anything up on this and get them going. Don't tie their hands by some bureaucratic stuff. So I appreciate that motion in that regard. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thanks for the excellent pictures, by the way. They really helped.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, and I just want to say, we try not to do late stuff, and I just want to thank Rick and Beverly for their indulgence and yours as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is the first time I've seen a walk-on from El Paso County. It's not?
Okay, member governments and other reports. Brian, Transit Services?
Good afternoon. Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit, with your monthly transit report. I'm going to go through all three of our, the performance of all three of our services, and then come back to the local fixed route item to discuss a little bit. But for our local fixed route services for the month of June, as compared to June of 2017, we saw a decrease of 9.2% in ridership. For our ADA services, we saw a decrease of almost 2.5%, which is, in this case, is a good thing. We'd like to have a lower percentage of customers taking the ADA service if they're able to take the fixed route service, so this is good. And for our van pool services, we've continued a good trend of increasing ridership on our van pool services, so we're up 10.4%. Going back to the local fixed route performance, this is the fifth month that we've seen a ridership decline so far here in 2018. And we've been monitoring it, and we still have a bit of work to do, but I've gotten several questions over the last several months. Do we think, the ride-hailing services, Uber and Lyft, are cutting into our ridership? I said I don't really know. I think we're finally getting into the trend of that we're seeing nationally with bus service having decreased ridership. There are some shining stars. The Seattle region has ridership on the plus side.
Because you can't get anywhere else without it. Sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of the more robust systems, the more dense cities, ridership is pretty good. But even some big cities are suffering on ridership on their bus system. And I think Uber and Lyft, has a place here in the city. There are many routes that we do not operate on weekday evenings or Saturdays and Sundays, so there's a place for that. But it doesn't really seem logical that if you're dependent on our bus system, why you would pay a very high cost for an Uber or Lyft trip, as opposed to taking our service. But in larger cities where there's a larger choice ridership population, people they have a car, but they're making a choice to take transit, they have more income, they can afford a Uber or Lyft trip. So I don't really think that's impacting us here, but there are a few other things. We're in a really busy construction season. We've looked at a couple routes preliminarily. Route 7 goes from downtown Terminal to the Citadel Mall on Pikes Peak. And Pikes Peak's been under construction for a while, so we've seen quite a dip in ridership on Route 7. And the Manitou shuttles, 33 and 36, they've been doing astounding over the last several years. I mean, ridership has been increasing every year, but this year it's down. And, there was a large... the COG's closed. Well, yeah, the COG's closed. There was a large CSU water line project on El Paso, Manitou Avenue. So, there could be some impact there. Then there's the West Side Avenue Action Plan project going on. So, those services, that's what we've been relying on, I think, for our ridership being so strong over the last couple of years. So we're seeing some things there. The economy is really good. Fuel is still really cheap, and if people have an option to take a car or own a car, I think that's a factor also. We just did an informal survey on Facebook last week, and it was a simple question: are you taking our fixed route service more in 2018 than you did in 2017? And the majority of the respondents, and it wasn't a huge sample, but most of them said they're either taking it more or about the same. Some people mentioned their employment situation changed a little bit, so they're taking it less. And some people mentioned that they do have access to a car now, so they're taking our fixed route service less. So, we're going to keep monitoring it. And, I also think the last couple of years we've been rebuilding our system. So when you're building from not a whole lot, and you start making some great increases and improvements in the system, that your ridership's going to increase. But we just seem to have hit a plateau here. But we'll keep looking at it and seeing what we can do.
Well, Brian,
Yes.
I want to say something encouraging because you sound
Please
very
do.
deflated.
Well, I just got back from vacation, so
Yeah.
Being here is deflating.
Well, as we know, you said it, the public transit across the country is experiencing some challenges with very few exceptions. The one thing that did kind of stick out to me is you had touched on the ADA being down, and also the overall ridership being down. The concern I have is, do we actually know that the ADA ridership being down is because they have the option of the fixed routes and other options, or is it a service-related issue as you see it?
Well, and you'll see the ADA ridership numbers fluctuate from month to month. Sometimes there will be an increase, sometimes a decrease. So it's really there's so much that's playing into it. A lot of this is seasonal. I mean,
Right.
We generally look forward to summer ridership because that's when our numbers are better.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's
Just
a
a blip.
combination of service and perhaps people choosing to take that service less.
Okay.
But it is provided to them. Yeah.
Well, welcome back from vacation.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
My condolences.
Yeah, I was wondering, I can't remember the name of the corporation, but there's a corporation going to come in and buy both shuttle services in town in September. Do you have any idea about what effect that's going to have on? Because it's going to basically change the status or the quality of service because it's a corporate, and they're going to combine the two systems. I was wondering if you had any idea on that.
No, I do not. You're talking the Vanpool services? There's going to be a...
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't know. But, I mean, as it is now, there's a lot of competition out there. I mean, there are the ride-hailing services, but there are several other van pool operators. I mean, we see a lot of different van pool vehicles in our park and ride lots.
Yeah.
So we already have that competition. I'm not really sure that it'll have much of an impact.
Tom?
Mhm. Yeah, free services do really great things for ridership. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah, Summit County, yeah, exactly. Okay.
And final item, just a couple project updates. Our final fall 2018 service changes, they've been approved. The only change here is the new Route 38, which will serve Memorial North and Children's Hospitals. We've been meeting with them regularly. They've hit some delays with construction. Children's most likely won't be done until April, and Memorial North, the renovations won't be done until March or early April. So the decision, part of this is grant funded through the Colorado Springs Health Foundation, and the decision was to let's hold off and give it the best chance for success by having, both of those facilities be done, and we'll start serving them once that's all finished. So we'll start serving them effective with our spring service change on Monday, April 29th of 2019. But everything else will go into effect this fall. And our one-ride call center began operating on July 1st after many, many years of coordination and collaboration. And so we're taking reservations and scheduling for our specialized transportation trips through Invita, which used to be Amblicab, Silver Key, Senior Services, Fountain Valley Senior Center, and Community Intersections. And I believe we've invited Bev and Rick to come over and take a tour of the new center. So we would like to have them see what we've done, and just thanks to the RTA for helping to make it happen.
Cool.
So
Been
any
a long
other
time-
questions?
Been a long time coming.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Any questions for Brian? Thanks, Brian.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. Item 7B, City of Colorado Springs, Las Vegas Royal Railroad Crossing. Aren't you lucky?
Yeah, I didn't know this was that exciting. Aaron Egbert, City of Colorado Springs Public Works. I am the project manager for the Royer Las Vegas intersection relocation project. I'm also the project manager for the Envision Shooks Run project, which was the corridor study. Park and Rec has a separate project, which is the underpass for the Legacy Loop, but I will be able to speak to some of those items for that. We have Steve Bodette here from Park and Rec that may be able to help if you have a more detailed question that I can't answer. So with that being said, too, I became the project manager of the Las Vegas Royer crossing in 2014, okay? There's a lot of history there that I don't have, but I've done some research for you, so I can kind of read some of that stuff into the record if that's appropriate. And then I started on the Shooks Run project in 2015. So we do have a lot of history. We have accident data at the Royer Street crossing from 1975 to 2010, and I could read those accidents into the record, or I could just give it to Rick if he wanted it. The city participated in funding improvements in the late 70s, which was adding flashers and guards and those kind of things. There was an idea floated by a citizen to relocate the crossing in the early 90s about 1.5 miles to the east, which is pretty close to where we're proposing our new Spring Creek Road. In 2005, we got a legal letter from the railroad, from their attorney, requesting that we close the Royer crossing, and that was from the PUC, Union Pacific, and Burlington Northern Railroad. So in 2005, we really started kicking this in gear because they had threatened to take this to close the crossing. So what we did is we used intersection safety money and started this Royer process of, do we raise Las Vegas? Do we go into the junkyards and those type of areas? How do we solve this issue? And what came out of that was in 2010, we had a preferred alternative to move the crossing 1.4 miles, essentially over by the Leon Young Service Center, where it goes under the 24 bypass. That was the first location that we could actually get the grades to work for that new crossing. In November of 2012, the PPRTA ballot listed this project as a relocation of the Royer to this new location. In 2015, we got some construction dollars. We also got additional funding to finish the final design, which FHU had started that in 2000, and I think it was actually Drexel and Burrell had started it early, and then when we kind of were running into problems, we did a whole new RFP to kind of come up with a new preferred solution there. Kind of where we're at today. So the plans are over 90% done for the Spring Creek Road and the closure of Royer, probably closer to 95. We do have an IGA with CDOT that outlines all of the maintenance responsibility of what the city's going to take care of on this new road and what they're going to take care of. The railroad agreement is in El Paso County's hands for review as far as that goes. There's a PUC application that the county is also reviewing, and once we have those documents, we'll be able to submit that application. Fountain Mutual we're ready to execute that agreement. Just need to kind of finish a few things. But this section of road where Spring Creek Road is, it's the most complicated 750 feet of road I've ever seen. It's got CDOT, railroad, ditch companies, El Paso County, City of Colorado Springs. It's just, it's been a lot of work to get this thing kind of figured out. We're anticipating late 2018 to advertise, maybe 2019, because we still got a lot of these things to kind of dot our I's and cross our T's with the railroad. And then the plan is like a 12 to 18-month construction schedule of the new Spring Creek Road. Once that road is open, that is when we will close Royer. So the soonest we could close Royer would be 2021 kind of time. Is that right? Did I do that right? 2020. So we could close it the first quarter of 2020. Probably be the time frame. As far as the Shooks Run, how that kind of interfaces with this. Back in 2015, we started a process to evaluate what the infrastructure along Shooks Run needs to be. That's a 4-mile section from the confluence all the way up to Patty Jewett Golf Course. There are 44 bridges that cross that section of Shooks Run. We had a very, very robust public involvement. A lot of people here were part of that process. We came up with a transformational approach, which replaces all of the bridges over time, a 30 to 50-year period, to have the trail as underpasses of all of those road crossings along the entire Shooks Run. But with 44 structures, it's going to take time, okay? So that's kind of what that plan shows. It also has a lot more connectivity to the hillside neighborhood with some new roads, some new pedestrian bridges over Shooks Run to help compensate for the closure of Royer, where that hillside neighborhood can't get down to Las Vegas. So let's see here. So as far as the Park and Rec, so that's kind of the two projects that I'm responsible for, kind of a brief update. So as far as the Legacy Loop connection, we are diligently pursuing easements for that connection. We've got private property on both sides of the railroad that we are trying to get public improvement easements or real property. And we've been, I think we're pretty successful, we're pretty close on that, but there's always a few little hiccups in property acquisitions. So option number one for the trail would be to put the underpass or the trail right where the existing railroad bridge goes over Shooks Run. They are very resistant to that from liability issues. So what we are trying to do is negotiate with them to say, hey, how can we mitigate that with you? How can the city take on some liability potentially? Take on some future maintenance to get that interim connection made until the bridge could ultimately be replaced with the trail and be hydraulically adequate. The other challenge is the bridge there today does not pass the 100-year storm, so any tunnels or anything we do, we have the potential to flood someone out downstream if we don't do it right. So we got to really, so the connections are getting further and further away. Option number two is to do a box culvert with a jack and bore method. So we would just slowly push a culvert, dig it out, push it under the tracks. We'd have to stop train traffic. The railroad has been very resistant to that because they had an issue in Fort Collins where they had some settlement. So we're strategically trying to figure out now how we can prove to them that if we do the jack and bore of a box culvert, we won't have the same settlement problems that they had in Fort Collins. But as Mike has said, their first answer to everything is kind of no, don't do that. We also have kind of a temporary shoe fly concept. Now the challenge with that is we would basically be building a temporary track, doing our pedestrian underpass, then switching traffic back. So that's like the most expensive option you could possibly do to have a shoe fly through there, which is why on the Tejon and Nevada Railroad bridges, we are looking at potentially doing offline construction, because then there's no throwaway costs for that kind of work. And then the fourth interim option would be to figure out how to put some on-street connections. So you would be able to go up Fountain, maybe go down Nevada temporarily, and then get back over to the main trail itself. So we got those four options. We are working diligently with the railroad. We meet with them quarterly, Union Pacific and Burlington Northern, to talk about all of our capital projects. So that is kind of an update of where we're at. This tunnel concept and these jack and bores, I don't believe we totally have funding for those yet either. And that's in like a $3 million range to do a jack and bore under the railroad. So we're talking big numbers here. So we're working as best we can to come up with a cost-effective interim connection. And you guys you want to fire away with questions, or do you want some citizen comments, or you guys get to choose?
Carlos?
You don't have questions.
And I'll do the best I can.
Do the best I can. Yeah. No, first of all, I want to thank you very much for that very informative presentation. Really, what the context with this was just really to supplement the information in one of the reports for the city reports about the closure of Royer. It is being used today, and for forced vehicle traffic. It is substandard. It's not the greatest thing, but it does work, okay? And so that was really the concern. Once it's closed, it will no longer be, well, it's be closed. You can't cross there any longer. I would just point out that I looked at the Hancock and Spring Creek crossing. It does have pedestrian and bicycle and, of course, vehicles. But it's not going to be suitable. It's going to be effectively cut off. So even though, 1.5 miles to the southeast,
1.4.
There's no way, you can't get there from Royer to that crossing. There's no way to get there except through a circuitous detour of some sort, possibly on Hancock or Fountain. So I just wanted to point that out. That's your understanding, right? There's no trail to
yes,
go
and with our plan, we do have a lot of signage where we're saying this is the way you're going to get to the new crossing to get to Las Vegas.
Okay, so let me just go back to just questions on your presentation. So you presented four options.
Yes.
Here, the on-street connection, make sure I understand it. On-street connection, is that through the Mill Street neighborhood and the Lowell neighborhood on Rio Grande Street, or some other connection are you referring to?
As of right now, I think that, and I'm not Park and Rec's representative of what that would look like, but I do believe you'd have to come up with some sort of a alignment up Fountain into Lowell neighborhood or down Nevada, or figure out a way to come down Tejon where we have a little bit more room.
Sierra Madre, for example, that may, I just want to see what that option for when you say on-street connections. But basically, it's just we're going to detour the whole thing.
We would do probably sidewalk improvements, wayfinding, signage, those type of things to be able to get people to the Greenway Trail that are coming down Shook's Run.
Okay, so that's basically we're just not going to even try to cross the tracks there. We're just not even worried about it. But the first three options have a...
Well, we are worried about it. We are trying to cross the tracks. But that is an interim option that if all these other easements fall into place and we can get something to start getting people connected and get that connection, that may happen.
Oh, okay, so option 4 in the options you listed is let me make sure I understand, a temporary connection, correct?
Correct. That is a temporary connection.
Until we have a solution for one or some combination of those, the three options you have, right?
Correct. And the envisioned Shook's Run plan shows that railroad bridge being replaced with the underpass. It's just going to be a funding and timing challenge.
So really, we're looking at the three options, the first three options across the track there at Shook's Run. Have any of them been eliminated as far as in contention? In other words, we've looked at this, we know it's never going to work, we're done, or are they still in the running and we just need to do some more studies? Have any of these options been eliminated?
I don't believe any option's been eliminated. We have taken the bore option to 30%, Steve, or we're taking it to 30%? 30%, because that feels like what other municipalities have done to mitigate these problems. But in my opinion, the best option would be to figure out a way to get under the existing railroad structure and work with them and mitigate their liabilities and their risks.
Option 3, the shoe fly, does that include some type of railroad bridge or trestle versus a bore or tunnel underneath the track bed?
Correct. And the challenge with that is there's a lot of radius issues and curve issues, so you have to build it far enough offline. And there's just a lot of throwaway costs with those steep grades. That is probably the most expensive option, would be to do a shoe fly.
And the shoe fly being a rail, I don't know what a shoe fly is, but it's a temporary diversion, but it would also, but that's temporary diversion, right? It's not permanent, is that correct?
Correct. That's a temporary diversion which would allow all the train traffic to use the tracks while you construct your underpass. And then you would move train traffic back and then disassemble all of your temporary shoe fly.
And how long would it take? I mean, it sounded like with the Tejon crossing in Nevada, it takes a day to send out a train to put in a new bridge. It can be done pretty quickly. Shoe fly still would be required.
Only quickly if the railroad does it themselves and they've got money stacked up on the tracks that they need to get deliveries done. There's a money pipeline, so they are very efficient at crossing creeks and drainages. They have not expressed interest in installing this for us, so it would be our responsibility to install all of this underpass.
Let me make sure I understand it. So if the railroad wanted to do it, they can do it fast, relatively cheaply. If the city wanted to do it, it would be expensive and take a long time. Did I understand you correctly, what you were saying there? I'm just not putting words in your mouth, but that's the way it came across.
That's probably true.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Or the railroad.
I was going to, just one more question here. Okay. And what's the, just kind of a ballpark, confidence level, 1 to 10, when the Spring Creek crossing at Hancock opens, how likely is it going to be that we're going to have options 1, 2, or 3 through Shook's Run? How likely are we going to be able to see a trail connection there?
It is a high priority for the city of Colorado Springs to make the Legacy Loop connection.
I understand it's a high priority, probability. The reality, is it not going to happen, likely not to occur by 2020?
I don't know, Carlos. That's a hard thing for me to pin down. There's a lot of things that have to happen.
So a question related to the trail itself. Have you looked at an overhead option of getting it over the railroad and don't deal with the rest of the stuff?
I believe an overhead option was looked at, but it was really expensive, and it's really hard to get all those grades to work. Plus, we keep getting, the further we get away from where the trail naturally wants to cross now.
So the issue is you can't use stairs even though the people are walking.
We cannot use stairs. Nope.
Yeah. We admit the enemy and they are us.
Is that fair to say, Steve, that we have looked at an overpass?
We looked at an overpass
Briefly?
but you're right, the grades just don't work out for us.
Okay.
I have one question.
Sure.
Do you have any idea how much right-of-way from the edge of each track the railroad has?
I do not. I really do not.
Because I do know that railroad police, if you are on that right-of-way, they can come out and arrest anyone. They have jurisdiction over that right. So that's why I'm for the box, even though it's more expensive.
Mhm.
It could turn out to be.
Yeah, and it's and their policing of their right-of-way, they have like one officer that covers 3 states. So they don't have as much enforcement as they want to have, and they are dealing right now. The numbers they've thrown me is they have a trained pedestrian issue once a week out there, and then that's why you're hearing those horns blow all the time. Is they're seeing people. Sad to say, there's a lot of suicides out there with these trains right now, and they have to put their staff on administrative leave because of the trauma having to deal with some of this stuff. So it's a big issue for them too, and we and the railroad need to work together on figuring this out.
Okay. Any comments from any other members of the committee? Any comments from the public? You guys were here. You want to make a comment? Please come to the podium and identify yourself.
I'm Chuck Donacoy. I'm sort of in a Patty Jewett neighborhood. I use the Shook's Run Trail a lot. I used to go to work by crossing at Royer. So I'm familiar with the area, and what I'm not familiar with is when I came here today, I came up over the interstate, over an overpass in Monument Valley Park. Is that a steep grade or not? What I'm wondering, it's easy to go over, which I think is the best thing, but the grades are too steep. That just doesn't seem to play with me. I can get up over the interstate. I don't know why they can't get up over the railroad track. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a good overpass there at Monument Valley. It's a lot used by a lot of people.
Lee Milner, Trails Advocate. I agree with Mr. Donakai. Actually, yesterday, speaking with a high official at the City of Colorado Springs, that person felt that an overpass was worth reevaluating. And Steve, I'd like that to be considered as a fifth option. I know there's a lot of problems with the first three options, and the fourth option really is only an interim. I understand that Aaron didn't want to answer the question about likelihood, but the reality is the likelihood of any of the first three being done by the time Royers going to be closed is, well, less than infinitesimal. So if a highly placed Colorado Springs official feels that doing an overpass makes the most sense, I would like to see that reevaluated. It might mean some purchase of private property. The figure that person gave me was $3.5 million. None of these things are cheap, but you're also talking about, $30 million railroad bridges, and so compared to one $30 million railroad bridge, or perhaps that buys you two, I don't think it does. The other problem is, as Mr. Donakai spoke about the overpass, there was, as many of you probably remember, an underpass underneath the interstate, and it was closed, as was an underpass at Del Norte, and it was closed for a variety of reasons. It's a convenience spot for perhaps the homeless to get out of the weather, to do other things that would not be very pleasant for a trail user. I know the overpass is a difficult situation, but the first three are also difficult and fraught with all kinds of problems. In answer to the question, yeah, you can't just use steps. You might have steps and a ramp, and landing the ramp on the south side of Las Vegas is admittedly difficult because it's so much lower than the north side of the railroad track. But the advantage of that is you get over Las Vegas as well. And at this point, the other options involve having to cross Las Vegas at grade, and that's a kind of a scary street. So I would ask Mr. Beaudet, thank you for being here, to bring that fourth option or fifth option, whatever you wanted to call it, back up for reanalysis to deal with this very sticky problem. And I thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you both. Any further comments?
I would just say that this legacy loop has been pretty important for the overall design of the trail system, and the spiral type concept of a ramp is also a possibility, and I agree. I'd like to see them reevaluate the over-the-top bridge.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that was an information-only item. There's no further comment on those. Aaron, thank you for your time and data. So let's move on to item 7C, El Paso County update on the West Colorado Avenue.
Any more cool videos, Dennis? No more videos.
Dennis Barron, El Paso County. I'm the project manager, at least for one more month, on the West Side Avenue Action Plan project. I apologize for the late submission of the item. I assume Rick has passed it out. But I just got them. No, okay. Okay, there is Rick has some items to pass out there. But I'll...
Did you get any rain over there on our project?
We did sustain similar, we had a significant rain event last Monday, obviously, and as you know, the project is putting in storm sewer systems, but the storm sewer systems are not completed and not connected. We had a lot of flooding. Manitou Springs, I think, was had an evacuation order, and but we had a lot of water flow through the construction site. So we're still evaluating the impacts of that, but we think our construction fared pretty well. The new bridge is appears to be okay. We're checking some of the walls tomorrow. We evaluated the old bridge that we were using for traffic. I think we closed it down on a Monday and had a structural engineer review that on Tuesday morning after the waters had receded, and determined it was okay to reopen it to traffic, which is a good thing because there's not a lot of options to pass through the area. With 24 has work going on it, and we're working on Ridge Road. We've got Columbia Road closed, so there's a lot of things happening that make transit through that area very difficult.
Challenging, at least.
Challenging is a good word, yes. So I just wanted to give you an update on the project. As you know, we awarded the construction contract back in November of 2016 to Wildcat Construction. At that time, we were very optimistic that we were going to be able to complete the construction in 2 years, and that was predicated on being able to acquire all the property we needed in a timely fashion. Property acquisition efforts have been challenging, is a good word, and have moved a lot slower. We had, for the contractor, when he put his proposal together, we said he should assume that we would have all the property we needed by June of 2017. We have 99 parcels, and they span all 3 jurisdictions, and you can read the details in there. But basically, we are still acquiring property. We have 17 properties that we have not signed documents yet from the property owners, and we're continuing to pursue them, but they have serious impacts on the contractor's ability to move forward with some of the construction. Wildcat's been very flexible in advancing construction in the right-of-way that we have and in easements as we obtain them. Some of the easements are being purchased for the undergrounding of electric, the utility and the communications lines. A lot of times, the utility companies will not begin the installation until you have the complete run, that they can know that they have a path to go from one end to the other of a segment. So we need to get all those properties purchased in order for them to begin construction of their things. Fortunately, they've been working with us, and we've advanced a lot of that. And I think in Manitou Springs, the underground work has been going in, but we haven't connected everybody over to the new underground system yet from the overhead. We're in the process of doing that. So hopefully in the near future, at least Manitou Springs will have, you'll see the poles start coming down, and we'll be able to start putting sidewalks in. So when I say in the near future, it's probably over the next several months. Yeah. We've started putting the new light poles in. You can see them as you drive through. And again, primarily in Manitou Springs, we are still trying to acquire some of the property at the east end of the project. So, and I've given you a feel for the flavor. We have 99 parcels. 17 we still need to get documents signed. Some of them we have documents signed, but they have to go through the process. The process, depending on which municipality it's in, it needs to be, and the value of the acquisition, it needs to either go to the board, come to the Pprta, go to the city council, depending on the value of the acquisition. And then we're able to request a check from Beverly. Beverly turns the checks around pretty quickly. then it has to go to the title company for closing. And then sometimes there's issues from putting the check in until you can get the property closed that just delay final closing. However, we generally take having our agreements with the property owners that they sign, that once we deposit the money in escrow, it gives us permission to move forward with work on the property. So it does give us a little leeway, but there's still a lengthy time from signing until you get the check, and a lot of times getting the property owner to sign the documents up front has been problematic. They always want something. In fact, we have had to take one property via eminent domain. There's a possibility there may be other properties that we may have to do that for the remaining property. Hopefully not too many. But anyway, that becomes critical to the contractor, because the contractor can't do the work as he planned in the areas where he's working, or where he planned to work, and he has to sometimes rephase the work. And I think Wildcat's been very responsive and productive, and Jacobs, our construction manager, has been very good at getting the contractor, working with the contractor to identify areas where we can advance the work. So we're not going to complete the project by the end of the year, but the good news is I think most of the major elements will be completed by the end of the year. We poured the bridge deck several weeks ago. We're building the walls along the creek. We hope to have the bridge ready for traffic sometime in September. The creek work, the relocation of the creek, we're doing what we can now, but this is probably not the season to be working in the creek because of the possibility of flash floods. So a lot of the creek relocation work, the stabilization of the channel will have to occur probably in the fall is what we're looking for. We think that most of the creek relocation work will be done then also. But we have walls to build on either side, and we couldn't get started on the walls, which are critical to the creek relocation, because the property acquisition that we needed to get in there and do that was delayed. We have the property I think we need now, so we're moving ahead with that stuff, but now we're dealing with the monsoon season, so some of that we'll build what we can, and most of that is offline. I mean, from the public's perspective, they need the road to open, they need the bridge to open, so that and we need the undergrounding to be done and the sidewalk. So we expect to have the bridge and the walls primarily done, most of the creek work done by the end of the year, at least west of the bridge. Some of that work will probably fall into 2019, because once we put the traffic on the new bridge, we have to take the old bridge down. There's still some utilities that have to cross under the creek. We did some of that under the new bridge before, but there's still some lines that need to go through, not as big as the water lines that we put there. But some of that work will continue into the fall, and probably some of it will continue into early 2019. And again, I'm assuming that the weather will cooperate with us there too. We've had good construction seasons the last couple of winters, so if we're fortunate enough to have that, that will allow us to get much more done. We also expect to have most of the underground utilities in, the storm sewer systems and the water lines, and most of the underground electric in by the end of the year. Again, we have to see how the weather cooperates, but we think that it's not as complicated as it was in Manitou Springs. So we think we're going to move quicker. There's not a whole lot. The city does have some drainage on the east end of the project, so we are supplementing that. So we don't have as much drainage pipe to install in the roadway as we did in the Manitou Springs and the east half or the west half of Colorado Springs. So we think that's going to be done. But then we also have the Ridge Road Plaza. Some of that work's going to continue into 2019. So the plaza will not be opened as early as we had hoped to. There's walls to build from Pikes Peak Avenue to separate the plaza, create the plaza. And then we have I'll call it the hardscape landscaping and historic elements that we have to install. We have an obligation because a lot of the elements along the project were deemed historic, that we have to memorialize some of that in the project, so we are still designing and getting approval from SHPO of what those displays will be, and they'll be probably one of the last things that get installed in the project. So I think from a user perspective, the traffic will be on the new bridge. We'll be putting in sidewalks as soon as we can get the poles out of the way and the underground electric connected up to all the businesses. So that will continue, and we're hoping a good portion of that, at least on the west end of the project, will be done. Some of that may trail on the east end because that's where we still have to get some property available. So schedule-wise, we're not too bad. It looks like the work may run into May. It may go quicker if we get a good winter, and some of that work in May may be top lift paving, and that will be temperature dependent. So if we get a warm winter, we'll do it when we can. But the bad news in all this is the project's going to cost more money. The contractors essentially. Project's going to be extended, 5 to 6 months longer than he had anticipated, primarily or mostly because we were unable to deliver the property as we had represented. So he's entitled, so there'll be a cost for an extension of time for the contractor to do his work, and we're in the process of working with them, and I don't have those numbers available. I just put the document together yesterday, but we are in the process of working with the contractor to assess and justify and see what those costs will be. Similarly, our construction management team will be on the site for 5 more months, 6 more months than originally planned. There will be additional costs for that. The design team will have additional support, and part of the design team is the property acquisition effort, and we've obviously, because of the extended time on property acquisition, those costs have gone up on that too. So there's costs that will be coming back to you on to request an increase in the project budget again. I also attached the last budget increase that we requested back in March for your information. I'm not sure everybody was here at the time, but it's a good summary of where we were at that time, and we increased the project substantially at that time. So it's a good history of where we were. But bottom line is the schedule has slipped, and the cost is going to go up. So with that, you can read the detail, and I'll take any questions.
When this project is done, will we be able to turn off 24 Highway on the Ridge Road and go up to Garden of the Gods ever?
Ridge Road will be closed from and it is closed now, from West Colorado Avenue to Pikes Peak. And so the answer is no. There won't be a direct connection there.
How come? That was used, wasn't it?
It was used, and I think some of the history was before I got involved, but I think the city evaluated that intersection. And if you're familiar with the intersection,
Yeah.
Pikes Peak's up here, West Colorado's Avenue's here, and it's screwy, very screwy geometry. And we were making that a signalized intersection. And I think it was determined that there was not a lot of traffic going up, and I don't know whether Mike has any more background on that, but the city determined that it was prudent to close that down because you couldn't deal with turn lanes and stuff between Pikes Peak and West Colorado Avenue and Ridge Road with a signal there. There just wasn't enough room to properly develop an intersection that will work at both locations. And Jen, I don't know if you have any further information?
Yep.
But no, the answer is no, that will not be opened. We're developing the plaza there at Ridge in its place.
I would just say to that, if you have further questions about that, I would have to ask Kathleen Krager to come speak with that. I mean, as you know, this is a multi-jurisdictional project. This is El Paso County, Manitou, and the city of Colorado Springs, and she went through all those analysis with the project team at that point, and I'm sure she'd be happy to come and speak to that if you want more information about that.
You still have 24 on Ridgevine or Ridge, Colorado?
Right now, it's closed for construction, okay, but you will be able to turn onto Ridge Road. Now, CDOT has some work going on at 24 and Ridge also, and I'm not sure whether they're restricting the left turn out of Ridge. I think it will be essentially, is it going to be a right in, right out, do you know? I'm not sure, but you can get from West Colorado to 24, and that, but you may not be able to cross over or make the left out of there. I'm not sure what CDOT's ultimate plans for that intersection are.
Any other questions for Dennis?
If I could, Mr. Chair, not a question. I just wanted, I've known Dennis many years since my previous time on the El Paso County HAC, and Dennis is retiring at the end of August. And I wanted to basically say that I've always known you to be the quiet, consummate professional. You've always been a valued member of the team at El Paso County, and I appreciate your long service with us, and I wish you all the best in your next life. and thank you very much for your dedicated service to El Paso County.
Get up.
I'll let you make a comment, but nice lead in, Brian. You beat me to it. That's okay. No, that's fine. I would be remiss on behalf of myself and hopefully the committee to let you get away without thanking you.
Thank you.
The work you've done on two recent major projects, Mark Scheffel and then the West Side Avenue, were phenomenal. And I, like Brian, applaud your honesty, your direct, your professionalism, and the knowledge that you've given this committee, this community, and you will be missed. And thank you. Wish you the best. So, you have anything you want to say?
I wanted to introduce my replacement, Brett Hartzell. He's been working with me the last couple weeks, and he's up to speed on the project, and he'll be taking it over, and it's in good hands with Brett. So,
Feel like you're drinking with a fire hose.
Yeah, it's a lot to get caught up on, but Dennis is taking the time to show me all he can before he goes, so we'll see. I got him for another month or so a lot left to.
Well, we'll try not to beat you up too much.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Brett, well, welcome, and we look forward to working with you. Jen, I know you're going to have a big hole in your staff, and Dennis, we wish you the best, man.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been fun working on the Pprta projects.
Say again?
I think Dennis looked like Brett when he started.
Yeah.
And I would just add that, Dennis has been with us since the beginning of PPRTA. I have very much appreciated working with him. We are going to have a resolution in front of our board to show our appreciation, our Board of County Commissioners to show our appreciation. But Brett is doing a good job, and I'm excited, that he has gotten the opportunity before Dennis leaves to very closely work with him. And Dennis has been, if you look at a lot of the large PPRTA projects for El Paso County, Dennis has been the one who's been doing those. So, and he really helped us get to, before PPRTA, El Paso County was truly more of a maintenance organization. In doing these projects, he's really helped guide the program and making sure that we grew in to be able to do these large capital projects. I have personally learned a ton from Dennis, and really appreciate his professionalism as well, and also I'm proud to call him a friend and a colleague. So just wanted to say thank you to Dennis as well. The other thing I just wanted to say is that we brought this to you because I wanted to be able early, because I wanted to kind of give you a heads up. We don't want to get to December and say all of a sudden we're running into next year. We are going to be working to get those costs, and as budget season is coming up, we're going to be discussing that. And we are working closely with the City of Colorado Springs, and this is something we put together, and I just wanted to do it as a heads up because we will be coming back to you. And I wanted you to have Dennis there if you had any questions, anything specific. But in any case, this project is somewhat very unique. I think it's probably one of the most complex projects that we have ever had in El Paso County, and this because of the jurisdictional issues and all of the unique circumstances of this project. So, and when we came to you last time, when we came to you originally with this project, we knew that we would have some unforeseen events and some of these issues. But I am confident that we are going to get this project done, and it is really going to benefit the community. So I hate to come back with extras and extra time, but I think that this, we knew that this was coming. So
Yeah, you
hopefully
guys
it's
have-
not a surprise.
The project management team has been up front with this. I think it's, for the newer members, we knew that this project had hidden costs, and we've known it from the get-go. They have been upfront about that. And so you can't take on a project as complex as this is without knowing that there are tires under the road and built into the bank and all this stuff. And so we just appreciate the level of detail and the heads up and the upfront information you give us. It doesn't come as a big surprise. So thank you, and thanks for your team. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on to 7D, City of Colorado Springs Monthly Change Order. This is informational. Does anybody have any questions with the city's change order log? Get away easy.
Thank you.
And likewise, for El Paso County, their changeover and property acquisition. Anybody have any comments or questions on that? If not, we'll move on through those two items real quick, unless the county wants to just come up and talk about it. Okay. All right. All right, administrative item, report on recent board actions. Any questions for Rick? Yes, no? Okay. Maybe an interesting report next month, huh?
Yes.
CDOT's gap update. Rick, you want to fill us in?
I'll just zip through the memo real quickly. The federal folks gave a thumbs up on the environmental assessment decision because they gave this project the finding of no significant impact, which is commonly called FONSI. So that clears the environmental step, so it can move on to the new step. The U.S. Department of Transportation awarded a $65 million infra grant to the project. There's a 60-day congressional option to object that we're almost done with that 60 days, but just waiting to see if anybody in Congress objects. Don't expect anybody to object, but you have to go through the 60-day timing, and check the box. There's still a lawsuit. I haven't heard that it's been resolved regarding the last year's Senate Bill 17267, which was supposed to generate $250 million out of using certificates of participation against state buildings to pay for 250 of the 350 of this project. So that's holding up the project as a whole. But as you see in number 4, in the 2018 legislative session, the Senate Bill 18001 did approve $92 million. That's not subject to the number 3 above, the lawsuit on the COPs. So that's enough to start the northern third of this project, which is called package number 1. The northern third, which is the south end of Castle Rock going south down to the Toma Road overpass. So that is supposed to have a groundbreaking ceremony just before or just after the Labor Day weekend. So that money is confirmed. The money in number 3 for the other 2 thirds of the project is not confirmed. Intergovernmental.
Somebody else besides me was astounded that 5 miles of road is going to cost $92 million. Does that seem? Am I crazy in thinking that's absolutely ridiculous? Okay, thanks. Sorry,
Oh, and by the way, it's in the same right-of-way.
Yeah, there's
There's no land acquisition cost.
Yeah.
Building a road.
Well, there's probably some new bridges.
How much did the entire interstate system cost again? Yeah, serious.
Let's see, number 5, intergovernmental agreements with the 3 local funding sources, El Paso County, Douglas County, and PPRTA are being drafted. Through the COGS, not PPRTA, but the PPACG and the Denver COG, Dr. COG, you have to have tip amendments for the second and third portions of this project, so they're in the works. And number 7, our favorite one, traffic and revenue study will need to be completed to determine how the express lanes, the new third lanes in each direction, will operate and what the variable toll rates will be. And the whole thing's supposed to be completed by the summer of 2021.
All right, any updates for Rick on, further updates on CDOT? More to follow. The last one.
8C, status of the Walmart lawsuit. As you know, Walmart and Sam's filed an appeal with the Colorado Supreme Court on the last day, June 28th, and we're waiting to hear if the court wishes to accept this appeal. Our consulting attorney advises us, as you can see in my memo, that the court only accepts approximately 10% of the appeal requests, and we'll see what the court does. And I'll send out an email if there's any update, but if it's real close to the next meeting, then I'll just save it for the meeting.
All right, any questions or any of that for Rick? Do we have any agenda topics for the next meeting? How about any communications from the committee members?
Happy birthday, Reb.
Yes, happy birthday, Reb. What? So we don't have Jim Knoll here to argue with him about whether or not he's the oldest or not now. So he
It's experience, not age.
It's experience.
I think I might be the oldest. I'm 81. Aren't I older than you, Reb?
Slightly.
Yeah.
I have seen it 8 different decades. A significant portion of both.
Well, happy birthday, Reb.
And many more.
If there's nothing else, I'd just again like to welcome our new members. And if you, for the newer members of the CAC, if any of these things generate some questions and you want some background or history on, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or to me. There's people who have been on the committee for longer than I have. And so there is some history behind some of these things. So if you got any questions about something, please don't be bashful about asking the question here in public, but otherwise feel free to reach out. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you said something about putting something on the agenda. Is that different than what I said earlier?
It's for our meeting.
It's just for our meeting next month here. Sometimes someone would have a subject that say, hey, I'd like to get an update on this, or what's the status of that kind of thing. And so we'll figure out what to do with the Green Mountain Falls thing. I'm going to have to defer with Rick on policy for some of that stuff, just because the A-list of projects for capital is a done deal unless we get voter approval to change it like we did with the I-25 gap thing. And the maintenance money is distributed on a formula, right, Bev? So there have been agreements between various member governments to loan, borrow, switch money around and that kind of stuff. The PPACG?
said our money wasn't good.
Right. Yeah, the PPACG, I was on that CAC for 6 years myself, and so that money is different money, and it's federal money, so it has a different set of rules. And so, unlike ours, which is local tax monies. Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, everybody have a great, we're adjourned. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your time.
I finally get to talk to my wife for the first time in 8 days. You mentioned that she's coming out.
Yeah, the thinner the packet is, the longer the meeting is. Fighting between the city and the
Oh, that's really nothing.